The people who are now in government don't really understand that the foreign aid itself is a front. They think, the people in the Trump administration, they think that the US is just doling out money to these beggy countries.
Are they at that table? Investigation, reduce spending.
We don't really have a problem with it. The Trump administration has wasted no time in gutting some of the US government agencies that worked closely with foreign governments like Jamaica. One of these bodies is the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, which up until a few days ago worked closely with the Jamaican government on programs such as crime prevention, disaster risk reduction, and HIV epidemic control. But at the time of this recording, the USAID website had been inaccessible for more than a day, and most of its data has been wiped off the internet. So let's talk about what the USAID's purpose and mission was, and some of the controversies that it's been involved in and accused of since its inception. Now, before it got the boot, the USAID said its primary purpose was to administer civilian foreign aid and development assistance. The USAID had a budget of more than $50 billion and was responsible for more than half of all US foreign assistance. Now, I was able to find a USAID fact sheet that said that the USAID works with the Jamaican government, civil society, NGOs, the private sector, donors, community leaders, and beneficiaries to identify and address challenges to improve citizen security and promote healthy and resilient environments. Now, some of the agency's activities in Jamaica include a youth empowerment program launched in 2024 worth $3 million US or 470 million Jamaican dollars. And it said it's an initiative designed to foster sustainable development and positive growth for Jamaica's most at-risk youth. It was a 5-year program, or was supposed to be, implemented by the Education Development Center and addresses critical barriers faced by youth in underserved communities, including limited access to education, training, and employment. Crucially, USAID has long been involved in Jamaica's response to the HIV/AIDS epidemic by funding access to much-needed healthcare services, especially in the areas of testing. Last October, USAID also launched a regional program aimed at reducing threats to marine biodiversity through improved management of marine protected areas, improved solid waste management, and increased sustainability of fisheries. This too was supposed to be a 5-year program lasting until 2029, working with 13 countries, including Jamaica, and aimed at protecting marine and coastal ecosystems that are critical for local livelihoods and economic development of the region, particularly for the tourism sector. So now that the Trump administration has pulled funding from USAID and other agencies, that is going to affect these kind of programs in Jamaica and all those other countries that are supported by USAID funding. But the United States was never doing any of this out of its benevolence. US foreign aid has always come with strings attached for any country that accepts it. And I have my own suspicions that USAID was involved in what took place in 2010. Now, we know for a fact that the United States uses foreign aid to strong-arm developing countries like Jamaica to get them to do what they want. But aside from that, there have been credible accusations that the USAID was a functionary of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. William Bloom, said that in the 60s and the early 70s, USAID has maintained a close working relationship with the CIA, and agency officers often operated abroad under USAID cover. The 1960s era Office of Public Safety, a now disbanded division of USAID, has been mentioned as an example of this, having served as a front for training foreign police in counterinsurgency methods, including torture techniques. In Brazil, USAID is accused of spending $95,000 in 2005 trying to influence political reform in a way that would have purposely benefited right-wing parties. In 2008, the Bush administration was accused of using USAID to fund efforts in Bolivia to undermine the Morales government and co-opt the country's dynamic social movements. From 2010 to 2012, the agency operated Zuneo, a social media site similar to Twitter, in an attempt to instigate uprisings against the Cuban government. During the 1990s, USAID was in the forced sterilization of approximately 300,000 indigenous women in Peru as part of the country's Plan Verde. Documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act reveal that the USAID effectively took control of Peru's national health system from 1993 to 1998 during the period of forced sterilizations. These sterilizations were part of a global strategy by the United States government to reduce birth rates in developing countries for political and economic stability. And in 1990, when the Yemeni ambassador to the United Nations voted against a resolution for a US-led coalition to use force against Iraq, US ambassador to the UN, Thomas Pickering, walked to the seat of the Yemeni ambassador and retorted, "That was the most expensive no vote you ever cast." Immediately, USAID ceased operations and funding in Yemen. So considering all this, I think what is happening here is that the people who are now in government don't really understand that the foreign aid itself is a front. They think, the people in the Trump administration, they think that the US is just doling out money to these beggy countries. There is a strategy to the foreign policy. And, if we had a functioning government in Jamaica ourselves, if we had a functioning government, they would see this as an opportunity to untether from the United States, to untether itself. We don't. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, but I can hope, For decades, the United States has pushed trade deals on developing countries like Jamaica that advance its interests and cripple our economies and put our local producers out of business. Foreign aid from agencies like USAID was what they used to sweeten the deal, because when the economy collapses, then there's more need for social programs. And so if the foreign aid is there to kind of shore up these social programs, then there is not so much backlash, from people who are going to feel the effects of a poor economy. So if the aid is not there anymore, what beholdens a country like Jamaica to stick with the United States? I mean, we know that we don't have leaders who are strong enough to stand up, but that's a question that now needs to be answered. If this decision is permanent and the US decides that it's no longer going to support Jamaica in the form of foreign aid, then what would be the reason for our country, our government, to be beholden to the United States and whatever requests that it has, even regarding trade? And I think someone needs to ask our leaders and Your Holiness and members of the current administration this directly.